appointed by George Bush, and in that key period after 9/11, fighting terrorism at home and reforming intelligence. And then when President Obama asked him to stay on, he did to serve his country. I put this on the screen because you can't capture Bob Mueller's 81 years or his many decades in public service, not in 5 minutes, not in an hour. But this split screen is so different from how some presidents operate today and how different from how many people currently in this Justice Department, but across the government operate. That willingness, that expectation, that nonpartisan upholding of the oath in its fullest sense. This is Bob Mueller's legacy here on the screen. In Trump's first term, many Americans learned again about the prosecutor when he was appointed precisely because of that nonpartisan independence. Remember, it was a Republican Justice Department, and it was a Republican Deputy Attorney General who said, we need someone who is independent and unassailable, and that was Bob Mueller. And he approached the Trump-Russia probe without fear or favor. They looked at those early incidents, if everyone remembers, the firing of James Comey, the questions about Russia, the questions about possible obstruction inside the White House. They did not establish, through that report, which of course Andrew worked on, a criminal level of what was sometimes called collusion or a criminal international conspiracy with the Russian government. And so that report, whatever people felt about it politically, also lived up to Mueller's legacy. He looked at everything, and he found what he found. The Times described him as a, quote, buttoned-down, lock-jawed, rock-ribbed exemplar of a vanishing caste, what they called the liberal Republican.
It is my honor to nominate Robert S. Mueller of California to become the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI must remain independent of politics and uncompromising in its mission.
When Bob's term was up, I asked Congress to give him 2 more years. And given the threats facing our nation, we felt it was critical to have Bob's steady hand and strong leadership at the Bureau.
They are a wonderful group of individuals. It is the people that has made the Bureau in the past, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
There aren't very many people for whom I would say this, but it is the end of an era. I mean, Robert Mueller is the last in a line of people that I don't think we'll ever see the likes of again. There just aren't very many figures like that in American public life anymore.
There are not many, and at this moment in time, within this government, you could say there are none. Maybe some will come again. Maybe we will have an ebb and a flow in our traditions of justice and nonpartisan adherence to the rule of law in this country. But we would be honoring and remembering Bob Mueller at any time for his contributions. We cannot ignore the fact that we honor him at this time when it is exactly his leadership, his contributions, his nonpartisan commitment to justice, rule of law, and facts, wherever they may lead, something that we sorely still need right now. That's our word on it on this program. I want to bring in Andrew Weissmann, who, as mentioned, worked so closely with Robert Mueller. I'm sorry for your loss and wanted to give you the floor tonight to reflect.
Well, one thing that I agree and disagree with Rachel about is it is true that we are not likely to see in public service the likes of him. I hope we do. But it's worth remembering that he has left a legacy for, I would say, thousands of people, career people at the Department of Justice and in the FBI who revere him. And in many ways, that is his legacy. The model he set is something that you may not see maybe in leaders in Washington, but for career people in the Department of Justice and the FBI and elsewhere in the government and the intelligence community, he was looked up to so strongly for his decades of experience. I mean, of course, there's his resume. He was somebody born into privilege who, when graduating from Princeton, volunteered to go to the Marines and served for decades in public service. He did not so-called cash in. He was somebody who believed strongly in public service, and he pushed himself and people around him to give their absolute best as a matter of the privilege that he felt for being in public service and what was owed to the public. I can give a quick story that I think gives you some sense of what I'm talking about. There was, when I was general counsel, there was some training material that people in the FBI had prepared that was really erroneous and said things about the Muslim community and was training about the Muslim community in ways that was really wrong and horrific. And he insisted that there be a thorough investigation, that be accounted for, that he own up to it. And he met with Muslim leaders himself. He wasn't going to pass this off to anyone. I remember him canceling everything that day to meet with people in a room where he said, I am going to sit there and I am going to explain exactly what happened. I'm going to own it. I'm going to tell them what went wrong, what we're doing about it. He also instituted a policy that new FBI agents, in addition to what Louis Freeh, a former FBI director, had done, which was that new FBI agents had to go as part of their training to the Holocaust Museum with the idea of seeing what an authoritarian regime could become. He insisted that they also go to a mosque, so that this religion was not as foreign to, and people weren't afraid of what it meant. And I remember he would not be interrupted until every Muslim leader who was in that room had every single answer to every question that they had and took ownership of it. And he just took that so much as part of what he owed when there was something that went wrong, that you don't hide it, that you don't make other people do it, that you hold yourself to account, and it's what you owe the public, that honesty and truthfulness, and that you figure out how you're going to correct it and tell people what you're doing about it. And that's just a vignette of the model, and I think it's why people like me just revered him so much, because he lived his principles.
Yeah, and you mentioned principles. We hear words like courage and service. We hear about public service a lot in covering government. And I wonder what you saw behind closed doors that you recall about him, because some people go into this field for one reason and it mutates into another. Some go into it from the beginning with thoughts about leveraging it, enriching themselves, power, attention, all that. And this was someone who we know, and we saw this over the years, and I covered him in the legal side on FBI DOJ, and then, of course, the Mueller report. This was someone who didn't seem to pursue any limelight and did very little, quote, leveraging. That's what we see in the revolving doors of Washington. What did you see of those qualities behind the scenes?
Well, remember also, here's somebody who he sort of had a natural shyness. He had an aversion to the press. He's somebody who at one point just said, I want to become a line prosecutor again and work on homicide cases as a line prosecutor in D.C. after having a very high level position in Washington as a sense of what he was about. I also think that the image of him as somebody who was brusque or cold could not be further from the truth. When I was working on the Mueller investigation, there were 2 times where I had been attacked in the press, and I was very concerned about being sort of a distraction. And I went in to resign twice to tell him that I really didn't want to in any way distract from the success and the apparent success of it. And, if we joked around with you, you knew you were just fine. And he was like, oh, don't worry. As soon as I don't need you, you're gone. But the 3rd time, there was an article, an op-ed that was calling on me to essentially have to be fired or leave. And it actually really did hurt. And I get to the office that morning, and Robert Mueller is outside my office waiting for me. And I go in and I start to resign again. And he said to me, I just want to make sure you know that your last day in this office will be my last day.